The human envoy stepped off the transport onto the polished floor of the Galactic conclave. The room was vast, with high ceilings that shimmered in colors he had no names for. Hundreds of eyes followed him, all different shapes and sizes. Some were wide and glowing, some faceless and shadowed. They had expected a weak, frightened human. They had expected someone small and easy to ignore. But he did not falter. He walked with calm steps, letting the silence weigh on them instead of breaking it. The matriarch, a towering figure with skin like polished bronze and eyes like molten silver, rose from her seat at the head of the council. Her voice, when it came, was soft but carried like a cannon. "Human," she said, "you are far from your world. Why do you come here, knowing we do not welcome your kind?" The human's words were simple, almost too simple. But simplicity, the matriarch knew, often hid a deeper strength. "Words are wind," she said, pacing slowly. "Your kind has survived for long, yes, but surviving does not make you strong here. Many species have survived longer than humans. Many have conquered far more. It is about adaptation. It is about knowing when to stand and when to change. That is what humans do. That is why we are here. Not in the way a predator studies prey, but in the way a craftsman studies a new material." The matriarch tilted her head, and the room seemed to hush instantly. She approached him slowly, each step measured and deliberate. "I have watched your people from afar," she said, her voice now low, almost intimate. "You survive in ways we cannot. You build communities even when the odds are against you. You fight, but you also create. You are small, yet you leave marks that last longer than empires." He knew better than to trust praise from a species that had dominated much of the galaxy for millennia. Then she came closer, stopping just a step away. Her breath was barely a whisper, but it reached his ear clearly. "Human, my children will carry your blood," she said. The envoy froze for a fraction of a second. He understood the words, but not entirely in the way some might think. She did not mean blood as in flesh. She meant inheritance, legacy. She meant the survival instincts, the cunning, the will to endure, the lessons that humans carried with them. She wanted her people to learn from humanity, to carry some of their essence into the future. "You speak of our ways," he asked carefully. "You want your people to learn from us. Our species grows old and proud. We are strong, yes, but we are stagnant. Humans, you have something we no longer have. You have creativity born of struggle. You have courage born of fear. You have hope born of impossibility. My children will need this. Without it, we will fade." They were cautious, and above all, they were afraid, not of humans themselves, but of what humans could inspire in others. "Then you do not fear us?" he asked. "You fear what we could teach them. But I also see that it may be the only way to save my people. I have chosen to risk their wrath for a chance at their future." Seeds that could grow in the hearts of an alien species, seeds that could change the galaxy in ways few could imagine. The council was restless. Whispers spread like fire. Some delegates leaned forward, curious. Others shook their heads, muttering warnings. The human envoy's calm presence seemed to amplify their unease. He did not speak again immediately. Silence can be more powerful than words, he reminded himself. Finally, the matriarch stepped back. "You will have time," she said. "Time to teach, to guide, and to test. My children are ready to learn. Are you ready to lead them? If they are not, then we will only watch and wait. Humanity survives either way." Every gesture, every facial expression, every subtle movement mattered. He learned more from the body language of alien species in 1 hour than most humans could learn in a lifetime. He was introduced to the young students of the matriarch species, future leaders, warriors, and thinkers. They were not like humans in appearance. Their eyes glowed faintly, their limbs moved in ways that defied simple description, and their skin carried patterns that shifted with mood. Yet in their expressions he saw curiosity, intelligence, and hunger for knowledge. The same hunger humans had always known. "I will learn from them as well," he said to himself quietly. "And they will learn from us. And all of this could be lost if we do not adapt. Humans, show me how you endure, teach me your strength. That is what humans do best. That is how humans have always won, not by being the largest or strongest, but by never giving up, by learning, by sharing, and by refusing to die quietly. Not the weight of command, nor the weight of fear, but the weight of trust. This species, ancient, powerful, and proud, was placing a piece of their future in the hands of humanity. And he knew that for the first time in the galaxy, humans were not alone. Outside the chamber, the city thrummed with life. Ships streaked across the sky, citizens moved along glowing walkways, and the wind carried a scent of energy and metal. Somewhere below, soldiers trained, diplomats argued, children laughed. And somewhere within it all, seeds of a new future were quietly taking root, seeds watered by the simple, unyielding human will to survive. The human envoy looked out over the city, his mind filled with possibilities. He did not know what the future would bring. He did not know if this experiment would succeed or fail. But he did know one thing: humans would endure, humans would inspire. Humans would leave their mark, not through fear or power, but through the quiet, unstoppable persistence that had carried them through every darkness the universe had thrown at them. The matriarch stood silently beside him, and for the first time, neither of them felt like strangers. They were partners in a plan far larger than themselves. And far above, the stars blinked like distant promises, waiting for humanity to touch them once again. And so it began. Humanity had come to the Galactic Conclave, not to conquer, not to negotiate, but to plant the seeds of endurance in a galaxy that had forgotten how to survive. The human envoy stood before the first group of the matriarch's young learners. They were a mix of future diplomats, warriors, and thinkers, each with eyes glowing softly in colors that shifted with emotion. Their bodies were unlike humans, lithe and strong, moving with a grace that betrayed centuries of evolution. But their minds, he realized, were curious, eager, and untested. This was where humanity could leave its mark, not through domination, but through influence. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice calm. "What I teach is not about weapons or tricks. It is about thinking, about choosing the right action when all paths seem wrong. Humans survive not because we are strongest, but because we see the world in ways others cannot. You speak of survival, yet your species is weak compared to ours. How can your ways matter to us? That is why you must learn from us. For the next weeks, we will begin simple exercises," he said. "You will encounter situations that are confusing, unfair, or impossible. You will make choices, and together we will discuss them. You will learn to think like humans, not to copy us, but to borrow the part of us that refuses to give up." He started small, riddles, ethical dilemmas, and puzzles that required teamwork. At first, the learners hesitated, relying on instinct and ancient training. One of them, a tall warrior with silver patterns across his arms, tried to dominate every solution. Another, a quiet thinker, refused to speak, fearing her answer would be wrong. The envoy watched. He said nothing. "Humans often learn best by making mistakes first. Do not be afraid to try," he told them. "There is no right answer, only a better way to think, and sometimes even the better way fails. That is acceptable. That is growth." The quiet thinker began speaking, her ideas clear and thoughtful. They argued, tested, failed, and tried again. And with each attempt, the envoy guided them subtly, showing how humans learn from each failure. "Why do you do this?" one learner asked during a break. "Your species is small. You do not command armies like ours. Why teach us your ways?" He could have answered simply, "Because it is what humans do." But he wanted them to feel the deeper truth. "We teach because ideas survive when bodies cannot. Humans may be small in the galaxy, but our thoughts, our creativity, our will, these are what endure. By learning from us, you strengthen your people in ways physical power cannot." Slowly, the room grew quiet. Some looked at him with new respect, others with doubt, but doubt that had shifted toward curiosity. Later, he took the matriarch aside. "They are learning quickly," he said, "faster than I expected. Humans are not just survivors. They are teachers in ways even I did not anticipate." He showed them how to read intentions without words, how to predict consequences by watching small actions, and how to adapt when plans failed. One exercise involved a simulated city under threat of disaster. The learners had to protect civilians, allocate resources, and respond to unforeseen events. At first, they struggled. Leaders clashed, warriors acted impulsively, and thinkers froze. The envoy allowed mistakes, observing silently. Afterward, they debriefed. "You see," he said, "failure is not defeat, it is information. Every mistake is a clue, a guide to make better decisions next time. Humans survive by learning faster than their enemies. That is how we endure." They communicated more effectively, listened more closely, and made decisions faster. They began to see the world not as a place with fixed rules, but as a place of constant change, where adaptation determined survival. The matriarch observed these sessions with growing fascination. Her people were learning not because of force, not because of reward, but because human methods unlocked curiosity they had long suppressed. Some of the older council members were skeptical, whispering warnings of corruption and unpredictability. But the matriarch knew better. Change was necessary. Survival demanded it. One evening, after a long day of exercises, the envoy walked along the balcony overlooking the city. The sky was streaked with silver and gold, and ships moved like schools of fish through the glowing atmosphere. The matriarch joined him quietly. "They are changing," she said. "I can see it in their eyes. My people, they may never be the same." Humans have learned it the hard way. Your species is learning it more quickly because you have the tools, strength, intelligence, and adaptability. All you need is guidance, not control. Perhaps your blood, your essence, can truly help us endure. The next challenge came in the form of interspecies diplomacy. The learners had to negotiate with delegations from other worlds, resolving conflicts without violence. The envoy guided them in observing tone, reading unspoken cues, and recognizing the hidden needs of others. At first, negotiations were clumsy. Some learners tried to dominate through intimidation. Others avoided confrontation entirely. "Humanity teaches balance," he reminded them. "Do not seek to crush or evade, seek to understand. Find the common ground even if it is small. That is how you survive when the stakes are highest." Their species, rigid traditions, softened under the influence of human logic and flexibility. They were not copying humans. They were incorporating human thinking into their own instincts, creating something stronger and more adaptable. One day, the matriarch visited the classroom unexpectedly. She observed quietly, watching the learners debate strategies, challenge assumptions, and solve problems creatively. She could see the change in them. The fear of failure had diminished. The rigid hierarchy had softened. The spark of curiosity, the hallmark of human survival, was alive within them. "You have done more than I imagined," she said quietly to the envoy. "My people, they will remember this. Long after we are gone, this lesson will remain. My children will carry your blood, not the blood of flesh, but the blood of thought, courage, and adaptability. Your species has given us a gift we could not have found alone." The matriarch's people had chosen to embrace human ways, not out of fear, but out of hope. As weeks turned into months, the lessons deepened. The envoy taught strategy, empathy, improvisation, and ethics. The learners began applying human methods in their own lives, reshaping their society subtly but irrevocably. Conflicts were resolved faster. Leaders made better decisions. Soldiers adapted quickly to changing battlefields. Diplomats negotiated outcomes that once seemed impossible. The envoy realized something extraordinary. The matriarch's people were not merely absorbing human teachings, they were improving them, combining instinct, strength, and intelligence in ways humans had never imagined. Humanity's influence would not only survive, it would evolve. One evening, the envoy stood alone in the observation tower, looking at the city and the stars beyond. He thought of Earth, of the long history of humans struggling and enduring against impossible odds. He thought of the matriarch, of her children, and of the seeds he had planted. He smiled faintly. Humanity's blood, its courage, curiosity, and ingenuity, was spreading through the galaxy, carried not in vessels of flesh but in the minds and hearts of others. And in that moment, he understood the truth of what he had always known. Survival was not about being strongest, fastest, or largest. Survival was about teaching, inspiring, and leaving a part of oneself behind in every corner of the universe. And so, the human envoy continued his work. Each day brought new challenges, new lessons, and new victories of thought over tradition, creativity over rigidity, and endurance over stagnation. Humanity's mark on the galaxy had begun, not with fire or conquest, but with ideas, courage, and the quiet, unstoppable power of will. The matriarch's words echoed in his mind. "My children will carry your blood." The lessons were no longer simple exercises. They had become a way of life. The young learners now approached every problem with curiosity and creativity, combining their species' strength with human ingenuity. Reports of their progress spread throughout the galactic conclave, and not all reactions were positive. In the main council chamber, species from all corners of the galaxy gathered. Their voices filled the room with tension. Many had expected a human envoy to fail quickly, to be dismissed as inconsequential. Instead, whispers of transformation reached them. "They are changing," one ambassador said nervously. "Their people, they are no longer predictable." Predictable or not, humans are fragile. How could such a small species influence a mighty one? It comes from thought, from persistence, from the ability to shape what comes next. If your species cannot see the value in adaptation, then perhaps you will fade while others grow stronger. and those who learned from humanity could endure as well. Meanwhile, the matriarch observed quietly. She understood that change brought fear. Her species had adapted to rules and structure for millennia. The idea of combining human adaptability with their own strengths was revolutionary. Yet she also knew that this fear was necessary. It would test their resolve and prove the value of what humans offered. Later, in a private session with the council, the envoy presented an exercise that would demonstrate the power of human influence. A simulated crisis was created, a planetary system on the edge of collapse due to environmental instability and political conflict. Delegates were divided into groups, each representing one of the matriarch's people's districts. Their task was to find solutions that ensured survival, cooperation, and long-term stability. At first, chaos erupted. Different groups argued over resources. Leaders tried to dominate others, ignoring advice and suggestions. Some students froze, unable to decide which path to take. The envoy observed silently, making notes but intervening only when necessary. "Stop," he finally said. "Step back, look at the situation from all angles, listen, observe, and think before you act. Human survival is not about rushing or forcing outcomes. It is about learning from every action, every failure, every choice." Leaders listened to ideas from their peers. Warriors coordinated with thinkers to ensure that solutions were practical. Diplomats considered the needs of every faction, not just their own. By the end of the exercise, the system had stabilized in ways no single group could have achieved alone. The council watched in astonishment. "How could this happen?" one elder asked. "They used strategy, cooperation, foresight, something they learned from a human." Some species celebrated the new knowledge, while others saw it as a threat. "If this small species can influence another, what stops them from changing us all?" a tall, insectoid delegate said sharply. "Perhaps nothing," the envoy replied calmly. "But what is life without growth? What is survival without change? Species that refuse to adapt are left behind. Those who learn endure." Outside the council chamber, the matriarch's students practiced new strategies. They trained, debated, and experimented. Warriors learned patience. Diplomats learned observation. Thinkers learned initiative. They were no longer merely students, they were innovators. Their influence began to ripple outward. Neighboring planets noticed changes in trade, defense, and diplomacy. The galaxy, once predictable, became slightly less certain. Some species tried to resist. They sent spies to study the human envoy and his methods, hoping to find weaknesses. They created obstacles, attempted sabotage, and spread rumors. Yet every attempt failed. The envoy's lessons emphasized not only adaptability but resilience. When faced with unexpected challenges, the learners found new solutions, demonstrating that human influence was not fragile but enduring. One day, the triangular alien delegate confronted the envoy again. "You are clever, human. You have survived when we expected failure. But what is your endgame? Why shape another species instead of advancing your own?" "My people have always survived by helping each other, by building networks of knowledge and trust. Shaping others is not conquest, it is preservation. Every species that learns to endure strengthens the galaxy as a whole. Humanity does not need to dominate. We need to ensure that life continues, that intelligence thrives. That is our gift." Even the most skeptical could not deny the results. The matriarch's people were thriving. Their influence on other planets was increasing. The envoy's lessons were spreading through minds and cultures like a quiet revolution. Back with his students, the human envoy introduced a new challenge. A simulated interstellar conflict had been created, where rival factions threatened to destroy each other. His students had to negotiate, strategize, and protect innocent populations without resorting to violence. At first, the students hesitated, fearing failure. But as they applied human methods, observation, communication, adaptability, they found solutions that no single faction could achieve alone. By the end of the simulation, the students had not only resolved the conflict, but had demonstrated leadership, creativity, and resilience. The envoy watched proudly. Humanity's lessons were no longer theoretical. They were alive in the minds of others, shaping the future. The matriarch observed the progress quietly. She knew that her people were no longer the same. They had been transformed not by force, but by the quiet influence of humanity. She realized that humans had given them something greater than strategy or strength. They had given them freedom of thought, the ability to innovate, and the courage to act even when outcomes were uncertain. Word of the success reached other delegations across the galaxy. Some species approached cautiously, seeking to understand how a human could have such influence. Others plotted in secret, fearful that their rigid systems would be challenged. Yet the envoy remained calm. Humans had always faced fear, resistance, and doubt. It was part of survival, and humans had always endured. One evening, the envoy walked with the matriarch across the observation terrace. The city below glowed with energy. Ships moved gracefully through the sky, and the hum of life was everywhere. "They are learning faster than I imagined," he said. "Yes," the matriarch replied. "And their success is drawing attention, not all of it welcome. Some fear your methods, human, others admire them. You have created both allies and rivals. But it is necessary. The galaxy grows stronger when species can adapt. When they cannot, they fade. That is the human way." He thought of the words the matriarch had whispered months ago. "Human, my children will carry your blood." The conclave had underestimated humanity again. They had expected weakness, but they were witnessing influence beyond any weapon or fleet. Humans had always survived by thinking, by enduring, by inspiring. And now, those methods were no longer confined to Earth. They were spreading through the stars. And so the human envoy continued his work, knowing that every lesson planted, every mind inspired, and every challenge overcome would ripple across the galaxy. Humanity's mark was no longer just on one planet or species. It was in the strategy of leaders, the courage of warriors, and the innovation of thinkers. The galaxy would not forget the human way. For the first time, many realized a quiet truth. Humans did not need to dominate to survive. Humans survived because they endured, and through that endurance, they could shape the future of countless worlds. The galaxy was shifting. News of the human envoy's influence on the matriarch's people had spread beyond the council chambers, reaching distant worlds that had never thought twice about Earth or humanity. Some species were intrigued, some fearful, and some openly hostile. For the first time in decades, the balance of power in the galaxy was not determined by fleets or weapons, but by ideas, ideas that humans had cultivated through centuries of struggle and survival. The matriarch's people were thriving. Her students, once timid and hesitant, were now confident, resourceful, and bold. They could anticipate threats, negotiate effectively, and find solutions where others saw only obstacles. But as their abilities grew, so did the scrutiny of neighboring species. Some saw this transformation as a threat. Others saw opportunity. Rumors and whispers began to swirl throughout the galaxy. A small, fragile species was teaching a powerful one how to think differently. What would come of it? The envoy walked among his students as they trained one morning. He observed them carefully, noting not only their progress but their subtle gestures, their problem-solving methods, and their ability to cooperate. It was remarkable to see creatures of such physical strength and long tradition now embracing flexibility, curiosity, and human-like improvisation. "You have improved greatly," he said. "But improvement alone is not enough. You must also anticipate those who will resist your change. Not everyone will welcome it. Some will fear it. Some will fight it. Ideas, adaptability, survival skills. Some species will feel their power threatened. They may try to stop you. That is the nature of the galaxy. Strength without flexibility is fragile. You have both now, do not forget that." Some accused her people of attempting to destabilize the political order. Others warned that allowing human influence to continue would create a new power capable of reshaping the galaxy entirely. The council was fracturing. The matriarch called an emergency meeting with the human envoy. She paced the room, her polished bronze skin catching the light of the setting sun outside. "They are afraid," she said. "Afraid of what we are becoming. They do not understand the lessons, only the power you are giving my people. That is a threat to those who rely on control, hierarchy, and predictability. Show them that your people can solve conflicts, stabilize systems, and improve lives without conquest. Show them that learning from humans does not make you weaker, it makes you stronger. That is your defense." They argued that adaptability and improvisation undermined ancient traditions, potentially causing chaos. Some demanded sanctions, others threatened isolation, and a few quietly prepared fleets in case diplomacy failed. The envoy remained composed. He knew that fear was the greatest obstacle to progress, and that it could not be confronted with anger or defiance. Instead, he focused on preparing his students for the real challenge, the moment when their abilities would be tested not in simulations, but in the scrutiny of the galaxy itself. He organized a new exercise. This time, it was a simulation of an interstellar dispute. Two planets were on the brink of war over scarce resources, and the matriarch's learners had to intervene, mediate, and resolve the conflict without bloodshed. They were given full authority to propose solutions, negotiate compromises, and implement plans. At first, the students were uncertain. The scenario was complex, filled with cultural nuances, political tensions, and competing interests. Some factions insisted on rigid positions. Some leaders acted out of fear. Yet, as the exercise progressed, the students began to apply the human lessons they had learned. They listened carefully, observed intentions beyond words, anticipated reactions, and proposed solutions that respected all parties while achieving stability. By the end of the simulation, the crisis was resolved. All parties were satisfied and the system remained intact. The matriarch watched, amazed. Her students had not only solved the problem, they had exceeded her expectations. "This is only the beginning," she said to the envoy. "They are capable of more than I imagined. They will be ready for what comes next." The envoy guided his students in diplomacy, teaching them to anticipate hidden motives, detect deception, and communicate clearly. The students learned to balance firmness with empathy, innovation with tradition, and strategy with morality. One day, a delegation arrived from a militaristic species known for aggression and cunning. They demanded that the matriarch's people cease all human-inspired practices immediately, claiming that they were destabilizing the region. The envoy accompanied the matriarch during the meeting. "Your methods are dangerous," the lead delegate said, its many eyes narrowing. "You teach them flexibility, independence, and improvisation. Such qualities have no place in structured governance. Stop this now or face consequences. You, a species small and insignificant. And now, that resilience is reflected in your neighbors." The matriarch's students continued to evolve. They began applying human-inspired methods in everyday life, governance, trade, education, and diplomacy. The changes were subtle but profound. Decision-making became faster and more effective. Conflicts that once would have erupted into violence were resolved peacefully. Innovation flourished. Their society became more resilient, adaptable, and respected. In private moments, the matriarch spoke with the human envoy. "I am proud," she said. "They have grown beyond what I imagined, and yet I sense the galaxy will not allow this to continue without challenge. If they fear your people's strength, it is because they recognize it. Fear is the first sign of respect in the galaxy." The envoy guided his students in teaching others, emphasizing that these lessons were not domination but shared knowledge. Yet, the challenges were far from over. Some species continued to plot, seeking ways to disrupt the progress quietly. Sabotage attempts, misinformation campaigns, and political pressure tested the matriarch's people daily. Each challenge was met with human-inspired problem-solving, observation, collaboration, adaptability, and moral judgment. The lessons of survival extended beyond the classroom. They became the foundation for real-world resilience. One evening, as the city glowed under distant stars, the matriarch stood with the human envoy on a terrace overlooking the skyline. Ships moved gracefully through the sky, and the hum of life resonated from the streets below. "They have grown far beyond my expectations," she said. "But I worry, will the galaxy accept this change, or will they try to destroy it? But your people now carry the tools to survive, to thrive, and to influence without force. That is stronger than fleets, armies, or weapons. That is the true mark of humanity. And perhaps we will show the galaxy that strength is more than physical power. It is wisdom, adaptability, and endurance. And ideas are impossible to destroy." And in the midst of it all, the human envoy knew that humanity's legacy, its blood of courage, adaptability, and wisdom, was alive in minds across the stars. The matriarch's words returned to him. "My children will carry your blood." They carried it not in veins or cells, but in thought, courage, and survival. And that blood would endure long after fleets had fallen, leaders had died, and empires had faded. The galaxy was changing, one lesson at a time, and humanity's quiet, unyielding influence was at the heart of it. Years had passed since the human envoy first arrived at the Galactic conclave. The matriarch's people were no longer the same. They moved with purpose, thought with clarity, and acted with courage tempered by wisdom. Their society, once rigid and predictable, now thrived on creativity, collaboration, and adaptability. Humanity's lessons had become part of their very culture, shaping the way they lived, led, and endured. Across the galaxy, observers from other species continued to watch. Some sought to emulate the transformation, sending their own students to learn the human-inspired methods. Others, still fearful, plotted quietly, unwilling to accept that a small species could wield influence without fleets or armies. The envoy had expected resistance. It was the natural response to change. What surprised him was the depth of transformation already achieved. In the central training hall, the envoy watched the matriarch's students at work. A crisis had been simulated. A distant planet was facing severe environmental collapse, and the students were tasked with creating a plan to stabilize the system while ensuring the safety of its population. At first, the scenario appeared impossible. Resources were scarce, factions disagreed, and time was short. But the students moved with calm efficiency. Warriors coordinated defenses with scientists, strategists negotiated agreements, and diplomats communicated clearly with representatives of the threatened population. They anticipated challenges before they arose, adjusted plans as conditions changed, and guided their people with authority tempered by compassion. Every decision reflected human principles of adaptability, observation, and resilience. The envoy smiled quietly. This was the culmination of years of teaching. The matriarch's people had not simply learned human methods. They had integrated them, improved upon them, and applied them in ways that no single human could have imagined. The seeds planted long ago had grown into a forest of thought, strategy, and courage. After the exercise, the matriarch approached the envoy. Her silver eyes gleamed with pride. "They have surpassed even my expectations," she said. "Your teachings, they have changed us in ways I did not think possible. I feared resistance, yet they have embraced the lessons fully. And now the galaxy is watching. That is more powerful than fleets, more enduring than empires." Some species admired these changes, quietly sending observers to learn the methods themselves. Others feared them, recognizing that adaptability and intelligence could rival strength and technology. The envoy attended one of these council sessions, standing silently as the matriarch presented her people's successes. "We have learned to survive not only with strength but with thought," she said. "Our victories are not in conquest, but in endurance. The human way has taught us that true power lies in creativity, adaptability, and the courage to act when others hesitate." The matriarch's people had become a model of resilience and innovation, proof that human influence was both transformative and enduring. Later, the envoy met privately with the matriarch. "The galaxy watches closely now," she said. "Some seek to learn, some seek to stop us. How do we ensure the lessons endure even if challenges arise?" "By ensuring that every mind, every decision-maker understands not only the methods but the principles behind them. Humans survive because we think, adapt, and endure. We do not dominate, we inspire. That is the key. If your people continue to practice and share these principles, they will survive any challenge." Will humanity endure to see the results? Neighboring species adopted aspects of the training, learning to balance strength with adaptability. Conflicts were resolved more efficiently, governance became more effective, and collaboration across systems improved. Humanity's mark on the galaxy was subtle yet undeniable. It was not in fleets or empires, but in the minds of those who had learned to endure. Despite successes, challenges continued. Some factions plotted to disrupt the progress quietly. Misunderstandings and fear still arose, and the matriarch's people faced crises that tested their resolve. Each time, the lessons they had learned from humans guided them. They communicated effectively, adapted strategies, and maintained focus on long-term survival rather than short-term victory. Through every trial, they proved that human influence was not fragile. It was resilient, adaptable, and enduring. One day, a coalition of species formally requested assistance in managing a complex interstellar crisis. They faced a planetary system on the brink of collapse due to political tension, environmental disaster, and dwindling resources. The matriarch's people led the intervention, applying human-inspired methods to stabilize the system. Warriors protected civilians, diplomats negotiated agreements, and strategists implemented solutions that ensured long-term sustainability. The envoy observed from a distance, proud of the transformation. Humanity's influence had spread far beyond the classroom. It had become a guiding force in the galaxy, shaping the decisions of leaders, the strategies of warriors, and the thinking of scientists. The seeds planted long ago had grown into a forest of resilience, intelligence, and moral courage. After the successful resolution, the matriarch addressed the council. "We have learned that true power does not lie in conquest," she said. "It lies in adaptability, cooperation, and endurance. We have learned from humanity that survival is not simply living. It is thriving through intelligence, courage, and the willingness to change." Humanity had proven that influence could surpass force, and that ideas could shape the galaxy more effectively than fleets or armies. As the envoy walked through the city, he saw his students interacting with leaders from other worlds. They shared methods, exchanged knowledge, and demonstrated the power of adaptability. Their confidence was evident, their judgment sound, and their creativity limitless. Humanity's legacy was alive in every action, every decision, and every mind that had embraced the lessons. The matriarch joined him on the observation terrace. "You were right," she said softly. "My children carry your blood, human, not in veins, but in thought, courage, and endurance. The galaxy will remember this." The matriarch's people had become a model of resilience, innovation, and moral strength. Humanity's influence had endured, shaping the future in ways that fleets, weapons, or empires never could. The envoy reflected on the journey. From the moment he had arrived, he had faced doubt, fear, and skepticism. Yet through teaching, observation, and persistence, he had ensured that human principles had taken root in a species far older and stronger than his own. Humanity's mark on the galaxy was secure, not through dominance, but through the quiet, unstoppable power of ideas. Years later, the envoy would return to Earth. He would find his own species changed, yet aware that the greatest legacy humans could leave was not power, conquest, or empire. It was thought, creativity, courage, and endurance, the qualities that had carried humanity through every challenge and now continued in minds across the galaxy. The matriarch's promise had been fulfilled. Her people carried human blood, not of flesh, but of mind and spirit. The galaxy had been subtly, irrevocably transformed. Species once rigid and predictable now embraced flexibility, intelligence, and moral courage. Conflicts were fewer, solutions more effective, and understanding across worlds deepened. Humanity's lessons had endured, and in that endurance lay the true power of their legacy. As the envoy looked to the stars one final time before leaving, he knew the truth of what he had accomplished. The galaxy would face new challenges, new crises, and new threats. But those who had learned from humanity would survive. And even if humans were absent, their influence, their blood of thought, courage, and adaptability would guide countless generations. The matriarch's words echoed in his mind once more. "My children will carry your blood." It was no longer a promise, no longer a hope. It was reality. The galaxy had changed, forever marked by the quiet, unstoppable force of human endurance. Humanity had arrived not to conquer, not to rule, but to teach, inspire, and endure. And in doing so, they had secured a legacy that would outlast fleets, empires, and stars themselves. The envoy turned from the terrace, leaving behind a civilization strengthened by human wisdom. Humanity's journey across the galaxy had only begun, but its mark, quiet, profound, and eternal, was already written in the lives of those who would continue to carry their blood.